All right, let's rewind back to 2013, when Cambridge Analytica first emerged under the shadow of the SCL Group, a so-called global election management agency. Now, for those unfamiliar, this wasn't just your run-of-the-mill startup. It was created with an ambitious goal, combining data analytics with targeted communication strategies to influence elections and campaigns worldwide. Big words, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The company was set up with some pretty notable individuals at the helm, including Alexander Nix. Now, here's a guy who became synonymous with the firm's methods and controversies. Alongside him, Nigel Oakes and Alexander Oakes played key roles in shaping their vision. Their focus? Voter micro-targeting, essentially diving into oceans of data to predict and influence voter behaviour with laser precision. Backed heavily by their parent company, SCL Group, Cambridge Analytica quickly got its foot in the door of political warfare, literally operating in some of the most powerful arenas globally.
And speaking of powerful, the connections underpinning this company were just insane. These founders weren't just connected to old classmates. We're talking political circles, military elites, even royalty. They could probably knock on the door of the Conservative Party leaders or pop in for a royal handshake. Those ties gave them access and very likely influence, which played directly into their mission of shaping political dialogues both domestically and internationally.
That's a crucial point. These networks placed them in a very unique position. For example, by 2014, Cambridge Analytica had alleged involvement in over 40 political campaigns across the United States. And one of the standout strategies they employed was called psychographic targeting. What does that mean? Well, imagine not just categorizing people by age or income, but by who they are emotionally, psychologically. They exploited personality traits to fine-tune political messages to individuals. It was, and still is in some ways, a groundbreaking, yet ethically questionable method.
Right, and that's what made them such a formidable force. They used this method to reshape campaigns. It's kind of eerie, don't you think? Knowing you're being profiled purely based on data tracks from online activities.
Very eerie. And they didn't just stop there. This wasn't only about campaigning, it was about power consolidation, making sure their clients stayed ahead in the narrative game, being linked to influential donors and groups, like some within the Conservative Party or American hedge fund manager Robert Mercer's family, obviously amplified their reach and resources.
And all those data points they gathered. They claimed to have 5,000 of them on every individual they targeted. 5,000! That's not just knowing what's in your shopping cart, it's practically knowing your memories too.
Which is where the ethical line starts to blur, doesn't it? That level of data computation, it simply raises the stakes in elections. But, well, Cambridge Analytica's story doesn't end there. Far from it.
And that brings us to the moment Cambridge Analytica became a household name. By 2018, all those ethical concerns we touched on earlier had boiled over in the form of one of the biggest data scandals in history. Remember the talk about data points and knowing you almost too well? Well, it turned out they'd gained unauthorized access to data from up to 87 million unsuspecting Facebook users. No hacking involved, technically. It was data collection, but without most people ever giving meaningful consent. Sneaky, right? Sneaky.
Yeah, sneaky and, well, just downright unethical. It all started with this app, innocuously named This Is Your Digital Life, that gathered data from Facebook users under the guise of academic research. But here's the kicker. By using this app, not only were the users' data collected, but also the data of their friends, multiplying their reach exponentially. And the developer behind it? Alexander Kogan. He might have been the face of the app, but Cambridge Analytica had all the intentions of turning that data into a weapon. A tool for voter profiling, manipulation, you name it.
Right, and let's talk about how they did that. They didn't just take your happy little likes on cat videos or your favourite pizza topping and leave it at that. Oh no, Cambridge Analytica analysed this stuff to create detailed psychological profiles. They use something called psychographic analysis, which basically breaks people down into who they are emotionally and mentally. So instead of grouping us by age or income brackets, they looked at what made us tick as individuals.
Exactly. By applying this psychographic profiling, they could craft tailored political messages designed to nudge you in just the right direction. And not just on the Trump campaign, mind you. This strategy is said to have played a role in the Brexit referendum as well. What we're really looking at is a blend of mass data exploitation and, frankly, psychological manipulation on a scale we hadn't seen before. It crossed an ethical line that left pretty much everyone questioning their own level of vulnerability online.
It's wild when you think about it, isn't it? Millions of us scrolling through Facebook, taking innocent little quizzes, sharing memes, posting birthdays. And yet, that data was twisted into something much darker. This disconnect between user consent, or the lack of, and how it was really being used, it's shocking. And honestly, it wasn't just limited to Facebook. Cambridge Analytica was reportedly gathering data from anywhere and everywhere, even partnering with third-party brokers.
And here's the real clincher. It wouldn't have worked without the user's digital footprints being handed over so effortlessly. That's where Facebook's role in all of this comes under the microscope. How do you justify allowing an academic study that spirals into a global data leak? And the scariest part, it wasn't like this sort of profiling was a one-off experiment. Cambridge Analytica claimed to work with thousands of data points per individual. Thousands! That level of insight into personal behaviours? It's borderline dystopian.
More than borderline, I'd say. And let's not forget, this wasn't done in obscurity. Cambridge Analytica marketed themselves as the kingmakers of political campaigns with these tools. They were selling a service to influence not just votes, but the very way voters even think about a candidate. It wasn't just about targeting ads anymore. It was about reshaping narratives altogether.
That raises a huge ethical question, doesn't it? Where do you draw the line between strategic campaigning and outright manipulation? The answer's blurred, especially when we, the everyday users, are kept in the dark about where our data's going. In 2018, this scandal not only exposed a company, it exposed an entire ecosystem. The revelations about Facebook's flaws and Cambridge Analytica's reach sparked a global conversation about data privacy that feels just as relevant today.
After everything that came to light with the Cambridge Analytica expose, you might be wondering, what happened to the company at the centre of it all? Well, by May 2018, the pressure was too much, and they officially shut down operations. But here's the thing. While Cambridge Analytica itself dissolved, the techniques and strategies they introduced didn't just disappear overnight.
That's right. They closed their doors, but not before spawning Emma Data, essentially a successor organisation built with many of the same individuals from Cambridge Analytica. And what's fascinating, or perhaps troubling, is how such playbooks for political marketing seem to persist. Even after the downfall, they didn't shy away from influence. It's as if one name goes down, but the tactics hold steady under a different banner.
It's unsettling, isn't it? Especially when you realise the potential for this kind of data handling hasn't gone away. And while Cambridge Analytica may have been the scapegoat, it showed the world how mainstream and profitable data exploitation had become. But there were consequences for others too. Facebook, for example.
Ah, yes, Facebook faced an incredible backlash. And quite the fine too. In 2022, Meta, Facebook's parent company, had to cough up $725 million to settle lawsuits surrounding how it shared or, let's be honest, mishandled user data. That wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It signalled how deeply the issue had resonated on a global scale.
Exactly. But I think what's even more significant is how this case catalysed public awareness. It forced people, and lawmakers, to take a hard look at data privacy and question the systems we'd grown to trust. This is where policies like the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, came into play. The introduction of GDPR in Europe was a turning point, strengthening user rights and corporate accountability for data use. It wasn't perfect, but a huge step, don't you think?
Absolutely. GDPR has its critics, of course, but it set a precedent. Companies suddenly had to rethink how they handled data because the repercussions now hit their wallets. If anything, Cambridge Analytica's story is less about one corporate scandal and more about what it revealed, namely, just how vulnerable the average person is in this digital age. And it wasn't limited to governments and corporations. It affected all of us. Data rights became a dinner table conversation.
But here's the troubling bit. How much have we really learned? Sure, we're more aware and companies make a bigger show of transparency. But with algorithms evolving, are our laws and systems keeping pace? It feels like a game of catch-up at best.
And that's the ongoing question, isn't it? How do we balance innovation in data use with ethical responsibility? The real issue is this grey area between what's possible and what's acceptable. Cambridge Analytica simply dragged that into the light. What it left behind was a reckoning for both consumers and industries. How much are we willing to give up in exchange for convenience and personalisation?
And honestly, can we even opt out anymore? That's the underlying concern. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about just one company, or even Facebook. It's about the entire ecosystem. The connected world we built is based on data, and until we figure out how to protect it without losing control, this sort of scandal might just be the start.
It's not just a question of laws, but of culture. How do we instill a sense of responsibility across the board, from the platforms we use to our daily habits? I think Cambridge Analytica taught us an important, if uncomfortable, lesson. Nothing online is truly free, and unless we're willing to demand better, we might not like what comes next.
A lot to think about, huh? But that's all for today. Thanks for joining us as we unravelled this complex, often unsettling story. Until next time, take care and think carefully about where you click.